Hello, and welcome to the Keep It Local Maine podcast, where we tell the stories of local business owners, artists, and entrepreneurs, and learn more about what they do, who and what inspires them, their challenges, successes, and more. My name is Todd Regalinski.
And I am Kimberly Regalinski.
And we are the publishers of Keep It Local Maine, a magazine that helps to showcase local businesses to the people in and around their communities. Thank you for tuning in to our weekly podcast that you can subscribe to on most streaming services such as Podbean, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora, Google Podcasts, and others. You can learn more about us at keepitlocalmaine.com and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube through the links in the show notes. In this episode, we'll be talking with Maine artist Marie Spaulding. Marie was born in Maine and has always been fascinated by animals and nature. It took Marie some time to find her artistic path after working in other non-art industries, but an opportunity that sold her first painting lit her creative fire, and from there, her art career took off. Her style is heavily nature-inspired and is a balance of abstract and realism. She uses a combination of mixed mediums and techniques, focusing on colorful, textured pieces. And now, a quick word from our sponsor.
You are a Maine business. A Maine business. That means you're the backbone of our community and a force for good in Maine. At Gorham Savings Bank, we think you deserve a bank that sees your business as more than a balance sheet. Every Maine business deserves that kind of bank. Call, click, or come by to learn how we can help your business thrive. You're a Maine business. We're a Maine bank. Let's get to work. Gorham Savings Bank. Banking is believing. Member FDIC.
Welcome to the show, Marie. We are so glad to have you here with us today.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
This is great. So can you tell us, when did you first take an interest in art?
Oh my gosh. So I've actually been involved and interested in art my whole life. I feel like I've always been I was always doodling as a child. Probably daydreaming and doodling in school when I should have been doing schoolwork, but I've always been involved in something creative, and growing up and over the years, taking different courses, just different painting, different courses, and just trying to experience. And I just enjoy being creative and using that kind of part of my brain.
When you doodled, because I'm not a doodler, and I've heard a lot of people say, oh yeah, doodling will actually make you smarter, or increase your attention span, or there's so many of these things where people are like, doodling is great. And I don't doodle, which makes me feel somewhat doodling inadequate. When you would doodle, are you talking like you'd actually do like pictures, or do you like patterns, or kind of a mixture of both?
I think a mixture of both. And the thing with, this is a good little like tangent to go here. The thing with doodling is that it could be anything. Like you just start making marks on the paper, circles or just whatever, just start doodling, writing words. And then it can morph into anything. A doodle could just be like, you're kind of almost, I think, meditating on paper, just kind of let whatever, whatever marks and whatever thoughts come out, just put it on the paper. Doodling is just one of those things that there's definitely no right or wrong with that specific aspect of art, for sure.
That is so cool. Okay.
Yeah.
That's a great quote. Doodling is meditation on paper, because my daughter she's an artist and she's constantly doodling.
Yeah.
And the more and more I think about it, and the more I kind of look at that, it's just this time of her to relax and just kind of meditate. So that is really cool.
And it's a great way to just keep your right brain activated too, because that's where all the creative juices kind of are. The left brain is the more analytical, part of your brain. So even if you don't think you're creative or you can't quote unquote draw, or you're not artsy, I think just doodling just keeps that right brain really activated and open. So it's great to just kind of get lost into some doodling on paper. I mean, it's a great way to just kind of meditate.
Yeah. My hardest thing is the first mark. Like I get paralyzed by that. Like I don't know, I'm going to make the first line and it's going to be bad. And then I'm like, oh, I've messed up the entire thing now. Yeah, that's where I get stopped on it.
Yep, that initial mark on a piece of paper, a canvas, whatever it is you're starting, it can be intimidating, but the more you do it and you just go for it, like it's going to turn into something. Like you just have to start. And if it's bad, I mean, you can turn quote unquote bad starts into something else, or put it off to the side, work on it later, or get a new piece of paper, a new canvas. I mean, not everything you create is going to be perfect the first time. So that is something you definitely have to kind of, get over, if you will, and just kind of go for it. Don't
Yeah,
be
and
afraid.
that was something I always thought if I was going to be an artist, I'd almost have to be like a Ralph Steadman kind of artist. Who I came across Ralph Steadman by way of reading a lot of Hunter S. Thompson books, and he would always be his illustrator. And just the idea of a lot of his work would just be him splattering stuff onto the canvas and then just going from there, like whatever came out, then he's like, oh, well, this kind of looks like a bird. And he would start doing it. And I'm like, that would be my way of getting over that hump.
Yeah. You can even just do that. Like, I remember you like really doing this as a kid, but even today as an adult, like you just like on a nice summer cloudy day, like with all the puffy clouds, you just look up and you start to see things in the shapes of clouds. I do that a lot. And even like, I actually live in like a log cabin. So we have like a lot of knotty pine, even in the knots in the wood. Sometimes you just see shapes and figures. So, it happens to me all the time. Like you just like the more creative and the more artsy you are, you'll just start to see
things.
You'll just start to see things in places you wouldn't normally think there would be, a face or an image or just, whatever. Yeah. So that's one of the many fun parts.
Yeah, no, I can definitely see that.
Yeah.
So you haven't always worked in art. So you had a life and a kind of a career before art. What was that transition like, and how difficult was it to transition from your previous jobs to art?
Yeah, so just a quick little like back note on this. So I went to school for art, but at the time I didn't really take it very seriously because I didn't know this is what I was going to end up doing. I just wanted to go to school and have fun and create and, and do all the fun, art classes and that sort of thing. So during that time, I ended up getting a job in a public school, long-term subbing for someone who was on a maternity leave, in a non-art position, a special education section of the school. So I worked with special education students. So at the time, it was great pay, great schedule. And when she came back, there was actually a position open within the school in a special education program that I kind of went, oh, this is kind of, great pay, health insurance, benefits, all that. And at the time, some of my college credits helped me kind of get to a decent level of pay within that job. So I took on that job at the school and did that. And during that, I was still not really sure what I was going to do with my art. And in 2008, I actually had an opportunity to display some local artwork at a local restaurant here in the area near where I live. And so I had a few things, and I wasn't, super crazy about just some assignments and things from school. So I put up some things, and in 2009, I actually sold a painting. So that was like officially my first sale, my first painting sold in 2009. And when that happened, I kind of went, oh my God, this is pretty cool. Somebody just paid me for this painting, this thing I created with my hands. So that basically lit my creative fire to say, okay, I can kind of do this. So I started to do more and more. That motivated me to create, to paint. A good friend of mine suggested I teach classes. I taught classes for a while, so over time I was just doing more and more with the art. And meanwhile, I'm still at the school, and it's really not where my heart was. I didn't initially set out and want to work in a school. And there's a lot of, political BS, and just schools are tough. Public school is very tough to work in. So I really got to a point where I was not fulfilled. It's not where my heart was. And it took me a long time, but I finally got to a point after 14 years of working in this public school of saying, I want to pursue my art career full time. And it took a while, and I kind of prepared and just, kind of planned a little bit. I didn't just quit. I tried to kind of plan it and just prepare for that. So the transition was, a little planned, but it was definitely a leap of faith. Because, like I said, I just went to school for art, no business experience whatsoever. I worked in a public school for 14 years, paycheck every 2 weeks, health insurance, schedule, vacations, and leaping into self-employment as an artist, somebody in a creative industry. I think I'm a little crazy, but here I am, and I'm doing it. So that's
awesome.
Yeah. So that happened officially in about like June-ish of 2018. So it's been just a few years. So I would say my business is still in the infancy stages, if you will, kind of in business terms. But
Mhm.
It has been a wild ride for sure.
Good for you.
So the transition from that to the art, so, from the public school to the art career, it's been interesting. It's
Mhm.
very interesting for sure.
So, I mean, it's got to be one of those things though, where, people often say, I wish I would have done this. I wish I would have done that, but at least you did it. And you can always look back and say, I did it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You don't have
Yes.
that regret. So that's so cool. But how do you describe your style and how did you discover that?
Yeah, so the discovery part is interesting because I mean I've been painting like I said, pretty much at some aspect my whole life. So it has definitely changed and advanced and morphed kind of the older I've gotten, the more I've experienced, kind of learned about new materials. So it's definitely advanced, if you will. So, but I mean, I would say the main thing that I paint is nature inspired art, which means, we're in Maine, so there's a lot of animals. I love animals and nature and have always been inspired by that outside of art since I was a kid. So, I mean, it's primarily nature based, a lot of, animals and nature and pet portraits. So, my style now is more, I've kind of morphed two styles together.
Mm.
I really love painting the realistic look of an animal, a pet, a flower, or whatever, trees. But I also like abstract. So colorful, collage, textured layers, all kinds of different marks and different things kind of going on. So I'm like, well, I'm going to combine the two of those. So I think it hasn't even really been a year yet, but within the last year, I've really morphed my style and kind of combined those two things. And it's still evolving because I'm actually taking a course right now that's helping me define that voice of my art even more, if you will, to really define my process and how I put down the paint and create a painting. So that's still even morphing.
Cool.
I mean, it's a continual morphing process. I mean, I don't think an artist ever gets to a point and says, oh, this is it. There's always, you always need to level up and advance and learn and experiment and try new things, but staying within what motivates you and what you love to create visually, I think is very important as well.
That's great.
Now, when you're working with different materials or different, well, I guess just different materials, like different types of paint, different canvas types, different materials you're painting on or that you're painting with, how does that influence your art, and how do you see that? Is that part of the exploration of what you're continually doing, or do you look at it as like, I'm going to go to this part of the toolbox and utilize these things for this thing that I have in mind?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it seems like it depends on, gosh, I mean, it's hard. You sort of have to start, or I have gotten to the point where I start with sort of an idea in mind, and I try to have some sort of visual created of what I want the painting to look like. So, for example, I mean, if I'm going to paint a crow, like I know I'm going to paint some sort of crow. And sometimes I just literally start with a drawing on the canvas and seal, like in pencil, and I seal the pencil and I just do like whatever color palette I want. I just basically do washes of color on the canvas. And then kind of from there, it depends on what I'm going to do next. So I think that's part of the influence part of the materials. I may see something in a certain section of paint, and want to, emphasize that with more color or put some paper down for collage or, add some texture or different things. So it's really fun because my style of art is called mixed media. So mixed media is basically all the other things besides paint that you're incorporating onto the surface or the canvas or whatever it is you're painting on. So I think it's so fun to have all of these different materials to be able to have endless possibilities. So, I mean, being influenced by materials, I mean, it's hard to answer that completely.
Yeah,
hopefully,
totally.
hopefully that answered it some, because I mean, there's
absolutely.
just so many materials and so many things you can do. I know I really love the mixed media part of it because, when you see a painting, like when I take a photo of a painting and put it on Facebook, you see the image, it's beautiful, it's colorful, but in person seeing a painting and
Mm-hmm.
you see, brush strokes and texture and patterns, and there's different layers. I mean, seeing the art in person is definitely, what it definitely needs to be seen in person. So I think that's a big influence for me, is just really having the interest of those textures and those materials seen on the painting.
Yeah.
Hopefully that answered that okay. Sometimes it's hard to explain.
Oh no, it makes a lot of sense, because, and especially the whole being seen thing. I think that there's, number one, I'm kind of a fan of painters who use like gobs of paint. Like I love when I see paintings that almost feel like they were intended to be like 3D kind of topographical maps.
Yep.
And I'm fascinated by that, because it's kind of this outrageous like extravagance of using that much paint.
Yep.
On a canvas. Like paint, as a parent who buys our daughter paints from time to time, I know paint ain't always cheap. So
no, it's not. But no, it's not. You're right. But and again, this kind of goes back to like what we said earlier, making that first mark on the canvas. Don't be afraid of using the materials, because that's going to create, that could potentially create something super interesting within the painting. Those thick gobs of paint, or thick, layers of texture and paper, whatever it is. I think that's the most exciting part about art, is when you see a piece of art in person. I always like to try to get up close and just kind of look at brushstrokes and texture and, how they layered, whatever it is that the material is on the canvas. I mean, that for me is interesting as well. Outside of just looking at the image as an overall, cohesive piece.
Yeah. And I can understand that too, because as a graphic designer, I'm not as used to doing the, the hand drawing and things like that maybe other graphic designers do. But I look at the way that something is laid out on a page, or the way something is presented on a screen, and I go, okay, now how would I reverse engineer this to find out how they did it? That's all. I'm always thinking about that. But even for something like painting, where I look at something and I'm like, I have no idea how I would reverse engineer. I have no idea where this person started. But for me, looking at the actual brushstrokes goes to a point of, the last person to put a brushstroke on this was this person. So going to a museum and seeing like a Van Gogh, a Renoir, something like that, and you're like, the last person to make a mark on this, whatever that last brushstroke was, or every brushstroke here, I'm looking at what a famous artist did. You can actually see the work.
Yeah.
And to be able to look at that, and to me, at least, there's a connection there. Like, I'm standing probably almost as close as the artist was standing when they made that mark.
Yeah.
Like, I'm literally standing where they were. And that, to me, that's remarkable, that you can kind of do that and be like, and it's still there. Like, in some cases, it almost looks like it's still wet. It's crazy.
Yeah. No, and that's a super fascinating for myself as well. I mean, just being able to watch somebody else's process too. I mean, and I think that's a really interesting piece too, because a lot of times, you see the finished piece, but how did that start? What was the first mark that artist made, in the steps and process and layers in creating that finished piece? That's kind of something I'm really learning to do too, is really enjoying that process. Cause I paint pretty fast. I mean, it doesn't take me that long to do a painting overall. And I want to see, I want to see it done. I want to see it finished, but I'm really trying to like enjoy my own process more in really enjoying each layer and each step, and kind of being more methodical about the layers and how it came together. Because I mean, that for me, not everybody gets to see that.
Right.
So I mean, I try to, within social media, I try to take pictures along the way to show steps in progress, of what the painting kind of went through to get where it ends up. So
that's cool.
Yeah.
So kind of going into the work process. So I noticed that you do commissions.
Yes.
Now, do you find it easier or more rewarding to do commissions than pieces you start from scratch? Because just as someone who has had to design for myself, I know that can be one of the most like gut-wrenching, like soul-bearing things of like, everything's a possibility. There's no one to tell me, no, you can't do that. No, do it this way. It's like, it can be paralyzing. So do you have a preference, or do you find kind of the reward and the drawbacks in each of them?
This is actually a really great question, and really makes me think about each aspect of that is totally different. And I enjoy each one differently. There are parts of them that are not enjoyable, and there are parts of them that are enjoyable. So with each one, pieces I start from scratch. It's my idea, it comes out of my hands in my head and goes onto the canvas, and there are parts of it. Sometimes if something's not working out right, sometimes I'm struggling with a piece to get it to come together to how I want it to look, so I mean, there's a struggle with that. But with commissions, it's very it's very exciting for somebody to approach me and say, hey, I want you to create me something. And then they kind of tell me what it is that they want. And then for me to do it, it's very exciting, because sometimes people are like, oh, I just want to put, I want you to paint my dog. You go for it and you kind of do your thing. That's very exciting. And then there are other people who are very specific with what they want. And it almost takes away from the creative process, in the sense that they already have an idea in their head. And I try to explain to customers or to clients, I usually try to get them on the phone and just have a quick chat and say, based on what you want, I would suggest this or that, and because it's a painting, not a photograph. So there's going to be some variation there, and it still has to be in my style. And I explain, that I use mixed media, and there may be paper and different layers and textures and different things like that. So I just try to make sure that I explain that to people so that they understand, because a lot of times people may say, oh, hey, would you paint me this landscape? I would call that a very super traditional, kind of like almost like, Bob Ross sort of traditional. I don't paint like that. I can, but I don't really prefer or enjoy that style of art. So I just, I try to reiterate that to people, because I've had some people ask me to paint some very, very traditional things. And I've kind of, had to explain to them that's not really my process. If I can take that thing you want and put my spin on it, then I would love to, but I just make sure I explain that. And some people are like, well, no, I'm not really sure I, want that kind of style. And other people are like, oh, okay, cool. Go do your thing. So, so commissions are a whole beast by themselves, just in that regard. But I really try to make sure I have a conversation with a client, or, if they've been following me on social media, they see what I've done. So they may already have an idea of what something's going to kind of be like. So the commissions and the originals there are good and bads to each one, but I would say, they're kind of both equally a major part of my business. So
yeah.
So let me ask you this. So as an artist, because our daughter is an artist, and she's done these original pieces, and I can't part with them as her mother. I refuse to part with them. I've bought them. I won't let anyone buy them. So for you, has there been that piece of art that you've created and that you just were so proud of? How hard is it to part with some of these things that you create?
Yeah.
I mean, because there's time and there's love and there's all of this thought process that goes into it. How is that?
Oh, gosh. And that's a great question, because I kind of almost feel like each painting that I do, I almost kind of refer to them as my babies, because they're part of me. I mean, they've come out of my brain and out of my hands and onto this, piece of cotton, canvas. And it's like, it's such a impactful, special thing. Yet at first it was weird, but I mean, just documenting each one with photography, get good high quality photos of each one so that you have that file of that image to have forever. So say you do sell a piece, or you do, give it as a gift or whatnot, you have that file, that photo image forever. I mean, yes, you don't have the original anymore, but if somebody's willing to pay you for it, I mean, that also in itself is very exciting. That somebody wants this thing you created, So, I mean, there is a little bit of a weird part of it. It is sad. I love all the paintings that I do, but some in particular, I really am attached to a little bit more than others for whatever reason. Like, for example, I just sold an owl painting that I did. And I was kind of concerned because it was pretty vivid, but just how freely and how loosely it came out. And as I painted it, it was just such a awesome feeling. And just, I love the image. And when it sold, I almost went, oh, I don't have it anymore. But, but I'm super stoked that somebody loved it enough to purchase it. And I have a high resolution, high quality image of that for me
Right.
now to, to make prints or, to
That's
do other
great.
things, which is just part of the process that I'm now
That's
doing.
great.
Yeah.
What Kim doesn't mention is that our daughter is an artist, that she can't part with artwork, but she can also be like the tyrant of all tyrants when it comes to commissions for our daughter.
Yeah,
No, I
well,
want it this way and this way and this way. And our daughter's looking at me like, can you help me out a little bit here? And I'm like, I was like, Kim, you got to let the artist do what the artist. Well, I know, but I just want it this way and this way and this way. I'm like, I don't think that's how this normally works.
No, I know.
Yeah.
You know?
I'm learning that.
Yes,
process.
yes. No, and that's wonderful. And again, that kind of goes back to that commission comment I was making. Some
Yeah.
people are very specific in what they want. But as an artist, I mean, and your daughter will probably have to get to this point. She'll have to say, okay, I can do that for you, but I have to still be able to put my artist spin on it with what you want incorporated in it. So it still needs to come from a place of like true to your heart and how it just comes out. Like, if you don't really want to paint like super traditional, like Bob Ross, like don't do that.
Don't do that.
If you love super abstract, colorful, funky things, then do that. That's where your heart is.
So
do
cool.
that.
Yeah.
I mean, it has to come from your heart. I cannot emphasize that enough.
Yeah, that's smart.
Yeah.
On the other side of the spectrum, I am absolutely of no help. So I'm not any better. I just paint me something. And she's looking at me like what? I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
She's probably like, oh my gosh, I got to get out of this house.
So she's learning.
Yes.
She's learning the business side.
Yeah, no, and that's great. And where she's so young, definitely if she, I wish I could give this to my advice to myself when I was younger, but if she is interested in possibly pursuing that as a career, I mean, I would say definitely let her do her thing.
Yeah.
Let her explore different materials and learn the business of it, now, because, and with technology and social media, I mean, being an artist now is so different than it was, years ago, because, you can take a photograph and have prints made. You can put it on coffee mugs. You can, you can have, there's so many opportunities.
That's so cool.
With art and having an art business now. So it really has changed a lot, even from when I first, started painting way back. So it's very exciting to have all these options and opportunities.
So this is a question that we like to ask because there's so many different variations to this question. And we like hearing kind of what people think. Is how would you say you define success?
Oh, this is good. Personally, from my point of view, being self-employed and having no prior business experience, I would just say no 2 days are the same. And to do it and you have to have some sort of grit. And I'll definitely keep this PG, but I mean, you have to have a certain level of oomph, if you will. And you got to have some real guts to keep going, especially in the creative industry, because art and art pieces are luxury items. People, I mean, yes, we love to look at art. We love to look at pretty things, but we don't need to buy art. It's not food. It's not paying a bill, so I kind of refer to it as a luxury item. So there are days when you have a really crappy day and you're like, oh my God, I don't know if I should do this anymore, and think about quitting or giving up. But it's like, no, you cannot do that. You have to be stubborn. So, I mean, I just think being self-employed itself and not quitting and having that daily grit of being a business owner is success. Whether you've actually physically sold something that day. I mean, it's not necessarily a tangible thing or item, which those are great. Don't get me wrong. But I just think overall and in general, that grit of being especially during COVID. I mean, we could have a whole nother podcast just on the COVID parts of everything, but just staying the course and having that tenacity and that grit and just not giving up. Because I mean, there have been days where I'm like, oh my God, what the heck am I doing? I probably really am crazy and shouldn't be doing this, but it's like, you know what? I'm too stubborn. I have gotten too far to where, to where I am now with my business. Yeah. I don't want to give up because I'm stubborn. And I want to keep going and keep pushing. So I just think that grit is what defines success. I mean,
the word I think of is steadfast.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Steadfast.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's just kind of my, success in terms of just being my self-employed piece.
Yeah. That's great.
Just not giving up, just keeping going.
Right on.
Yeah.
Another question that we like to ask, because we are admitted inspiration junkies,
Yes.
is who or what inspires you?
Oh my gosh. Well, definitely the what piece of that is nature. I mean, I was born and raised in Maine. I lived down in Florida for a few years, but I'm now back in Maine. We are surrounded by a beautiful state with like tons of animals and nature and trees and mountains and just so, I mean, animals, are my favorite thing to paint. So just that, I love watching like nature shows on TV and different things. And animals are so, I think, going back to the word tenacious and resilient, it's so fascinating what animals go through in just their life. And so then when I painted animal for another, again, going back to the crow, I used the crow example earlier. Crows and ravens kind of come up in my artwork a lot. And just, you look at pictures, you kind of study and learn about the animal, and so from my perspective and in my experience, I've learned about a lot of different animals and things I didn't even know about them before. So I mean that itself is inspiring. I love animals. I love nature. I've always been fascinated and just drawn to them.
Do you have a particular animal that you prefer? Is there a favorite animal that you like to paint?
I wouldn't say I have a favorite, but I do paint crows and ravens a lot. That is one animal that I have painted quite a few different times, but I mean, in general, I wouldn't say that I have a favorite. Probably not anything creepy crawly like
yeah,
like bugs or insects, but generally. Yeah. So I mean, like warm and fuzzy, critters and creatures, but for the most part. But it's not to say that I wouldn't paint an insect or bug for somebody if they wanted, something specific. But I love being in Maine. I love seeing animals. It's so hard for me to. Sometimes when I'm driving around, there's different farms and stuff around, and if there's cows out in a field, like, and they're near the edge of the road or the fence, like I'm that crazy lady who like pulls my car over and like just talks to the cows out the window. It's like I love animals.
That's awesome.
I just absolutely love animals. They're just I don't know. I love them. So it's just
and it shows in your artwork.
Yes, thank you.
Shows.
Thank you so much.
Well, Marie, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to talk with us. We definitely appreciate that. In our show notes, I'll be sure to have a link to your website, which has a shop where you can get prints. I believe there was canvas bags. There's all kinds of different things where you can get your artwork. So I'll make sure I include a link to that. I'll also include links to your social media. And just thank you so much for what you're doing and for the beautiful art that you're bringing into this world. And we wish you great success in this coming year.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you again so much for having me on your show. I really appreciate this. It's been great.
It's been our pleasure. Once again, we'd like to thank our sponsor, Gorham Savings Bank, and encourage you to check them out through the link in the show notes. And thank you again for listening.